He was the kind of man who believed emotions were a weakness, a millionaire CEO whose world ran on logic, numbers, and control. When she walked away 3 years ago, he told himself it was for the best. She'd find someone else. Someone who could love her the way he couldn't. But fate never truly erases what the heart hides. One stormy night, a phone call shattered his perfect world. Her name, the hospital, ICU. When he rushed through those cold corridors, nothing could have prepared him for the sight, her body covered in wires, her hand tightly holding the ring he once gave her. And in that moment, the man who had everything, power, wealth, and fame, realized he'd lost the only thing that ever mattered. Ethan Cole had always believed love was an illusion, a beautiful distraction that made strong men weak. As the CEO of Cole Enterprises, he built an empire out of precision and discipline. No emotion, no mercy, no weakness. That was his code, and he lived by it. Until Maya. She had entered his company 3 years ago as a marketing assistant, quiet, hardworking, unassuming. Ethan had barely noticed her at first, but something about the way she carried herself stood out. She wasn't impressed by him, not his power, not his money, not his name. That intrigued him. For months, she was just another face in his perfect world of order, until one evening, when the rain poured outside and they both worked late, she laughed softly at one of his sarcastic remarks. And for the first time in years, Ethan found himself smiling. That moment was the beginning of something he never planned for. What started as small conversations turned into long nights, shared coffees, and silent moments that spoke louder than words. Maya had a warmth that disarmed him. She listened when no one else dared to speak. She cared, even when he tried to push her away. And somewhere between meetings and midnight drives, the ruthless CEO fell for her. But falling in love wasn't part of Ethan's plan. He didn't believe in happy endings, not after watching his own parents destroy each other in the name of love. So when Maya's eyes started holding questions about the future, about forever, Ethan did what he always did best. He ran. "I can't give you what you deserve," he told her one evening. Standing in his penthouse with the city lights glowing behind him, she looked at him, tears trembling in her lashes. "I never asked for your empire, Ethan. I just wanted your heart." He turned away. "My heart doesn't belong to anyone." That was the last thing he said before she walked out. After she left, the world went on. Deals were made, awards were won, and Ethan's name appeared on every magazine cover. But success felt hollow. Every time he saw her favorite cafe, her perfume in a passing crowd, or her smile on a stranger's face, something inside him cracked. He told himself she'd moved on, she deserved happiness, maybe she'd found it, maybe she'd forgotten him. Until one stormy night, fate decided to remind him that time doesn't erase love, it buries it deep until the right moment. Ethan had just returned from a corporate gala, tired of fake smiles and shallow conversations, when his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Cole," a soft voice asked. "This is Nurse Amelia from City General Hospital." His stomach tightened. "Yes, it's about Maya Bennett. She's been in an accident. She's in the ICU. You were listed as her emergency contact." His world stopped. For 3 long seconds, he couldn't breathe. "Maya?" he whispered. "Yes, please come quickly. It doesn't look good." He grabbed his keys and ran into the night. Rain lashed against his car windshield as he drove through the city, his mind spinning. Why would I still be her emergency contact? Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? By the time he reached the hospital, his hands were shaking. The sterile smell hit him like a memory he didn't want. The nurse led him down the quiet corridor, her eyes heavy with pity. "She was brought in last night," she said softly. "Car accident. She hasn't regained consciousness." When Ethan entered the ICU room, time stood still. Maya lay there, fragile, pale, her body surrounded by the cold rhythm of machines. Her lips were dry, her hair messy, but even in that state, she was beautiful in a way that broke him. He took a shaky step forward, and then he saw it. In her hand, clenched tight against her chest, was a silver ring. His ring, the one he'd given her on a quiet night, back when he still believed they might have a future. Ethan's knees weakened. He reached for the ring, but his fingers stopped just inches away, afraid to touch something sacred. "You kept it," he whispered, voice breaking. All this time, he sat beside her bed, silent. The machines beeped steadily, each sound echoing the heartbeat. He'd tried to forget. He remembered the day he'd bought that ring, not as a proposal, but as a promise. She had admired it in a shop window, and though he'd pretended to be uninterested, he bought it the next day. "It's just a gift," he'd told her coldly, but she knew better. Now, years later, She still held it. He ran a hand through his hair, guilt washing over him like the rain outside. Maya, he said softly, his voice trembling. Why didn't you let me go? I tried to forget you. God knows I did. But you, his voice cracked. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against the edge of her bed. For the first time in years, the cold, unbreakable CEO wept. He stayed there for hours, watching her chest rise and fall, terrified that each breath might be her last. Nurses came and went, but he didn't move. When morning light filtered through the blinds, Ethan finally stood. He looked at her one last time and whispered, I'll stay. No more running. He didn't know what the future held, or if she would even wake up, but for the first time in his life, he wanted something real. Not control, not success, not perfection, just her. And as he looked at her hand holding that ring, one truth echoed in his mind like a vow: love never really leaves. It waits for you to be ready. The soft rhythm of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. Each beep was a reminder. She was still here, still fighting. Ethan hadn't moved from her side since the night he arrived. The once ruthless CEO, who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, now sat motionless, gripping her fragile hand like it was the last thread holding his world together. The doctors came and went. Words like stabilizing, head trauma, possible recovery floated around him, but they were just noise. All Ethan heard was the silence between each of Maya's shallow breaths. He remembered how she used to hate hospitals, how she'd once said, they smell like sadness, trying to pretend it's hope. Now she was trapped inside one, and he'd give anything to take her place. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His tie hung loose around his neck, his eyes hollow from the weight of guilt. Every hour, he replayed their last conversation the night she left him. You think love is a weakness, Ethan, she had said, standing by his penthouse door. But one day, you'll understand it's the only thing that ever made you strong. He had watched her leave, thinking she'd turn back, but she never did. And now he was the one standing at her door, only this time, she couldn't open it. A nurse entered quietly. Mr. Cole, you should rest. She's stable for now. He shook his head. I'm not leaving. The nurse hesitated. You've been here 2 nights already. I said I'm not leaving. There was no authority in his voice this time, just desperation. She nodded gently and left him alone again. Ethan turned his attention back to Maya. He reached out and brushed his thumb against her knuckles. You remember when you said I was made of stone? He whispered, his voice trembling. You were right, but the truth is, you're the only one who ever made me feel alive. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, his chest tightening. I thought walking away would protect you. I told myself love would only break us both, but all it did was break me. Hours passed. Outside, the rain had stopped, replaced by sunlight creeping through the blinds. He stared at her, memorizing her face, the same curve of her lips, the small scar on her chin from the time she burned herself cooking, every detail, frozen in time. Then something shifted. A faint sound, a movement. Her fingers twitched. Ethan froze, eyes widening. Maya, he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. A faint sigh escaped her lips, like the softest breath of life returning. Her eyes opened, hazy, unfocused, and then found his face. For a moment, confusion, then recognition. Her voice was barely a whisper. You came. Ethan leaned forward, his throat tight. Of course, I came. I never should have left. Her gaze drifted to his hand holding hers. Then, slowly, she looked down at her other hand at the ring. She smiled weakly. You remember this? He nodded, tears threatening. I never forgot. She took a trembling breath. Why are you here, Ethan? He swallowed hard. Because I still love you. Because I can't stand seeing you like this. Because I was wrong about everything. A tear slid down her cheek. You always wanted control. But love doesn't follow rules. He closed his eyes, her words cutting deeper than any wound. I know. And I've lost years trying to unlearn that. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I thought you forgot me, she said softly. I used to imagine bumping into you somewhere. Maybe you'd smile. Maybe you wouldn't. But I never imagined this. He shook his head. You were never gone, Maya. You've been here. He touched his chest, over his heart, every single day. Silence settled over them, heavy, fragile, full of unspoken forgiveness. For the next few days, Ethan became a constant presence. He brought her flowers every morning, white lilies, her favorite. He'd sit beside her bed and read aloud from the novel she once loved. The staff whispered stories about the cold-hearted CEO, who now smiled softly at nurses, who refused to attend meetings, who spent his nights watching over a woman everyone thought he'd forgotten. One afternoon, Maya turned her head toward him and said, "Do you remember the first time we met?" He chuckled faintly. "You mean when you spilled coffee on my $3,000 suit?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You yelled at me. I was a jerk. You were terrified." He blinked. "Terrified? Yes," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Because for the first time, someone wasn't afraid of you." He stared at her, realizing how deeply she'd always seen him, even when he couldn't see himself. "You always made me feel human," he said finally, "and I didn't know how to handle that." That night, after she fell asleep, Ethan walked out to the hospital balcony. The city lights shimmered below, distant and cold, like his life before her. He pulled out his phone, opened his work email, and began typing. Subject: temporary leave. Body: effective immediately. I'll return when she's home. He hit send and felt an unfamiliar peace. When he returned to her room, he found her sleeping peacefully. He sat down, his fingers brushing the ring again. "You waited for me," he whispered. "Now I'll wait for you." As the night deepened, Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling him under. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for success, not for control, but simply for another chance. And as dawn painted the sky in gold, he felt her hand squeeze his. It wasn't just movement this time, it was her answer. Maya's fingers tightened around his hand, weak but certain. Ethan's eyes flew open. He wasn't dreaming this time. Her breathing was steady, her eyes open, and for the first time since that haunting night, she looked like herself again. "Hey," she whispered, voice hoarse but soft. He swallowed hard, his throat burning. "Hey, you scared me?" She gave a faint laugh, the kind that carried both pain and peace. "Guess it's my turn to break your heart for once." He leaned closer. "You've done enough breaking just by being gone." Her smile faded, and silence lingered between them, filled with all the years they had lost. "I saw the ring," he said, glancing at her hand. "Why did you keep it?" She looked down, eyes glassy. "Because I never really wanted to stop believing in you, even when you made it impossible." Her words hit him like a confession wrapped in forgiveness. "Maya," he whispered, voice trembling, "I thought you'd moved on, that you didn't want me anymore." "I tried," she admitted, "but some people don't leave your soul, no matter how much time passes. You were my biggest mistake, and my greatest love." He pressed his forehead against hers, the smell of antiseptic and tears blending into something strangely holy. "Then let me make it right this time. Please, no more running, no more pretending I don't need you." Maya smiled faintly, exhaustion flickering in her eyes. "Ethan, you don't owe me anything." He shook his head. "No, but I owe us everything." 2 months later, the rhythmic beep of the monitors had been replaced by the soft hum of life outside the hospital. Maya's recovery had been slow, but steady. Her doctors called it a miracle. Ethan called it grace. He had moved her into his lakeside home, not the cold, steel-edged penthouse he once ruled from, but the small, quiet house he bought years ago and never lived in. It was where he imagined a different version of himself might one day exist, the one Maya always believed in. Every morning, he made her tea. Not his assistant, not a nurse. Him. He would sit beside her on the porch, both wrapped in silence as dawn painted the water gold. Sometimes she'd talk about her dreams. Sometimes she'd talk about the past. But most mornings, she'd just rest her head on his shoulder. And that was enough. One morning, as they sat watching the sunrise, Maya reached into her robe pocket and pulled something out. It was the ring, still gleaming, still waiting. "You know," she said softly, "I used to imagine this moment 100 different ways." Ethan turned to her, heart pounding. "And," she smiled, "in none of them were you this gentle." He exhaled, a broken laugh escaping him. "I'm learning." Slowly, she took his hand and placed the ring in his palm. "Then learn one more thing, Ethan Cole. Love isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about choosing the same heart, even when it's cracked." He looked down at the ring, then at her. Are you saying?" "I'm saying," she interrupted softly, "if you still want forever, I'm not walking away this time." Tears blurred his vision as he knelt before her, not as the powerful CEO, not as the man who lost everything, but as the one who finally understood what mattered. He slipped the ring back on her finger, his voice trembling. "I thought success was my empire, but it was you. It's always been you." She touched his cheek, her thumb brushing the tears. "And now you finally believe in love." He smiled, a quiet warmth in his tone. "No, I finally understand it." 6 months later, the mansion that once echoed with silence now hummed with laughter and life. Ethan had stepped away from his company, not forever, just long enough to remember what living felt like. He started a foundation in Maya's name for trauma recovery, 4 second chances, for people who needed to be seen. She became its heart, working beside him, her quiet strength guiding the mission. Reporters tried to call it a redemption story, but for Ethan, it wasn't about redemption, it was about return. Every evening they walked along the lake, hand in hand. She'd tease him about burning dinner. He'd tease her about stealing his sweaters. They'd laugh. That kind of deep, effortless laughter that once felt impossible. And sometimes, when the sky turned pink and the water stilled, Ethan would whisper the same words every time. "I thought I'd lost you, Maya." She would smile, eyes shining. "You did, but then you found yourself." He'd chuckle. "And you still chose me, always." That night, as they stood by the water, the wind carried a soft chill. Maya leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her. "Do you ever think about what could have happened if I hadn't gone into that ICU?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, eyes glimmering under the moonlight. "Every day. But then I remember, love doesn't wait for perfect timing. It just waits for courage." Maya smiled, resting her head on his chest. "You finally found yours." He nodded, holding her close. "Because of you." The world fell silent again. Not the silence of loneliness, but of peace. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang from the hospital across the lake. Ethan squeezed her hand. "That sound used to haunt me," he said softly. "Now it reminds me how lucky I am." Maya smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars. "You didn't just find me, Ethan. You found your heart." And for once, the man who built empires closed his eyes not to escape, but to feel. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't won in boardrooms or battles. They're found in the quiet moments when love returns to where it belongs. Sometimes, life gives us a second chance, not to change the past, but to prove we've grown beyond it. Ethan thought he had everything: power, success, control. But it took losing Maya, and almost losing her forever, to realize that love isn't a distraction, it's the reason we live. If you've ever walked away from someone you truly loved, this story is your reminder. Fate doesn't forget. It waits quietly until you're ready to understand what really matters. Because in the end, money fades, power shifts, and empires fall. But love, real love, survives everything. Don't just chase success, chase the moments that make you feel alive. Watch till the end. This story will touch your heart and remind you what it means to come home.